American leaders are stupid.
They are all a threat to our sovereignty as individuals, as communities, as electorates.
America is divided, an incredibly corrupt political system. The U.S. is a debtor country at a significant scale, and it's a deficit country at a significant scale, meaning not only does it owe a lot, but it borrows a lot.
Yanis Varoufakis and Jeffrey Sachs just dropped a bombshell, and it's not pretty. They say America is on a full-speed crash course toward collapse by calling out reckless policies, political chaos, and a system cracking from within. This is a chilling reality check. And the question is, can America change course before it's too late?
The essence of Trump, it's Aristotle's word for somebody without self-control.
America will collapse right in front of us. That's not a conspiracy theorist talking. That's Yanis Varoufakis. And he's not alone. Jeffrey Sachs says the same thing. America is tearing itself apart from the inside. This is a brutal warning from people who know what a collapsing system looks like because they've seen it happen.
I don't think it was interest so much, except the interest of someone playing the game of Risk, thinking that this is a big board game and you need your piece on every spot of the globe in order to win.
What makes their words so cutting is how they frame it. This collapse won't come from some outside enemy. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's America hitting itself in the chest, again and again until something breaks. And when it breaks, it'll happen right in front of us. These aren't slow-burning problems anymore. They're open wounds. Varoufakis and Sachs describe a system addicted to short-term wins, political theater, and debt so big it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a noose.
It is a source of major crisis.
Let's break down what they're seeing. Varoufakis points to structural flaws nobody wants to admit. The U.S. lives on deficit spending like it's a drug, with trillions borrowed year after year, hoping the world will never call its bluff. Supply chains? Fragile. One pandemic showed how quickly shelves can empty and production can freeze.
And business people can use it around the world to make free payments without bypassing the dollar system. That is a clear and present mortal danger.
Meanwhile, tariffs and political games are making allies nervous and enemies opportunistic. Varoufakis says this isn't a typical downturn. It's a full-blown system failure waiting to happen. The old model of endless growth, cheap credit, and global dominance is cracking, and he's blunt about it. This is about the collapse of an entire economic design, not just a bad quarter or two.
Countries succeed not by manipulation of currencies or other gimmicks and measures. They really succeed by science, technology, education, technological advance, investments by government, investments by the business sector, and so forth.
Then Sachs steps in and adds gasoline to the fire. He doesn't just call out bad policy, he calls it suicidal. America's fiscal behavior, endless deficits, military spending dressed up as stimulus, protectionist tariffs, isn't sustainable. Sachs highlights currency manipulation, inequality that's off the charts, and a broken education system that's supposed to power the next generation. He argues these aren't soft issues, they're economic landmines. And what's worse, the leadership acts like it's still 1950, like U.S. dominance is automatic and forever.
Trump is doing nothing except undermining that long term. So there is no strategy of technological advance, education, addressing underlying realities of American society.
They both point to a dangerous arrogance. Sachs recalls sitting across from top officials during the Greek crisis and watching the same mindset, a refusal to listen, a belief that power protects you from reality.
To my mind, we run large trade deficits because we have 7% of GDP budget deficit, and the dollar has been operated like an endless credit card. We have had an exorbitant privilege of borrowing endlessly at low interest rates, and both political parties are fiscally Irresponsible is such an understatement.
But America doesn't have that cushion anymore. The debt is massive, the political system is divided, and the rest of the world is moving.
I guess the point that I would make is neutrality worked for Europe extremely well. It worked for Sweden, it worked for Finland, it worked for Austria. It worked. Yes.
Varoufakis also warns about geopolitics. He says U.S. foreign policy looks like a board game, pushing NATO closer to Russia's borders, treating conflicts like strategy pieces. Sachs compares it to playing Risk, where Washington thinks it can break up Russia, contain China, and still stay the world's banker. But this isn't theory. It's costly. Wars, sanctions, military buildups, they drain resources and distract from the rot at home. Sachs says neutrality worked for Austria, Finland, Sweden, but the U.S. rejected that model, insisting on dominance. And Trump? He shook the game board, pulling back from some fights, but leaving behind tariffs, chaos, and an even bigger deficit. What makes this terrifying is the timing. Varoufakis and Sachs aren't saying collapse is 100 years away. They're talking about a visible unraveling, education gaps, debt spirals, inequality boiling over, trade partners moving elsewhere. They see an America that's still flexing, still boasting, but showing cracks everywhere. And those cracks, they're not slowing down. They're spreading.
So I give Trump 0 for substantive, long-term strategy.
Let's talk about the self-inflicted wounds. Trump's tariffs. Remember the whole America First vibe? Sounds patriotic, right? Sachs and Varoufakis call it something else: economic self-sabotage.
If you put on these tariffs, which are structurally really so poorly targeted and inefficient, it's beyond belief, because every industry depends on imported intermediate products. So tariffs don't help industries, tariffs destroy.
The idea was to protect American industries, but instead it's like putting a lock on your own fridge and then wondering why you're starving. Supply chains went from efficient to absolute chaos. Companies suddenly had to pay more for materials, farmers got slammed when China stopped buying, and businesses were forced to scramble. And here's the kicker. While the US was busy building tariff walls, China and other competitors just walked around them, grabbing market share like it was a Black Friday sale.
If you try to depreciate the currency in that context and the budget deficit remains large, okay, you really will get more inflation. And once you get inflation, you really will get the Fed keeping interest rates high and rising, by the way, not just in nominal, but in real terms now, because the US can't borrow.
Sachs doesn't mince words. Tariffs didn't make America stronger, they made it slower, more expensive, and less trusted. And the side effects? Inflation spikes, higher interest rates, and market volatility. You know those moments where the stock market feels like a teenager's mood swings? Yeah, a lot of that is rooted in this policy chaos. And all of it wrapped in the excuse of national security. Sachs basically says, America is fighting a war against itself and calling it patriotism. Deficits? Record-breaking. Spending? Reckless. If fiscal responsibility were a sport, the U.S. wouldn't even qualify for tryouts.
It's something the United States does not understand. Neutrality absolutely is a dirty word in the U.S. lexicon.
Now, here's where Sachs gets almost savage. He compares U.S. foreign policy to playing a board game, Risk specifically. Think about it, moving plastic armies across a map, but forgetting that the real world doesn't reset when you lose a piece. Sachs argues America's obsession with NATO expansion and its almost cinematic goal to defeat Russia is, well, suicidal. It's not 1991 anymore, but U.S. policymakers act like they're still the undisputed kings of the board.
Is that Ukraine should be a neutral country that is neither owned by NATO or owned by the West or owned by the European Union, nor by Russia. And that was Ukraine's vocation. And it's not a bad vocation. It's just something, it's something the United States does not understand.
And here's the kicker. They're ignoring countries that actually made neutrality work. Austria, Finland, Sweden. These guys stayed out of the fight and thrived. Meanwhile, the US keeps poking every bear in sight, chasing Cold War ghosts. Sachs even invokes Zbigniew Brzezinski's old geopolitical fantasies, saying Washington is still chasing strategies that belong in a history textbook, not a playbook for 2025. And the Allies? Don't get too cozy. Sachs and Varoufakis basically call out Europe for being more liability than partner. Irrational escalation, military budgets ballooning while economies shrink. It's like watching someone max out their credit cards to win an argument at dinner. Varoufakis and Sachs give us these jaw-dropping insider moments. Meetings with Schäuble, Lagarde, Draghi, and the so-called Troika. Sachs recalls the sheer arrogance of EU elites, how they brushed off warnings as if reality was optional. And then there's the almost surreal stuff. Volkswagen converting production lines to tanks. Yes, tanks. Europe's answer to economic stagnation, military Keynesianism, build weapons instead of wealth. And Varoufakis' point is chilling. Everything that hollowed out Europe, America is now doing the same thing but on steroids. Bigger debt, bigger wars, bigger denial.
We won, you lost, now we do whatever the hell we want and you have nothing to say about it. And that literally became the NATO view. We'll move where we want, we'll put our missile systems where we want, we'll leave whatever nuclear treaties like the anti-ballistic missile treaty that we want to leave because we are the United States of America and you, Russia, are nothing. Exorbitant privilege of the US dollar as being the sole world key currency. I don't give it 10 years of continued life.
Sachs says the US loves to think it's still the boss, still the empire running the global show. But the reality? The leverage isn't what it used to be. America's a debtor nation now, with deficits ballooning and debt ceilings turning into political theater. Sachs even drops a prediction that sounds like sacrilege in Washington. The dollar's dominance? Maybe 10 years left, max.
So I hope we never come to that, because it would be certainly a disaster for the United States and most likely a world disaster.
And that myth of infinite power, thinking the US can just bully China or strong-arm global trade, is, according to Sachs, pure fantasy. The trade war with China? He calls it a catastrophic miscalculation. Instead of breaking Beijing, it gave China time to strengthen its own supply chains and reduce dependency on the West. And here's the scary part. The illusion of empire might be the most dangerous thing America has. Because when you believe your own hype, you don't see the cracks forming under your feet. Sachs and Varoufakis are basically saying, the denial is the policy. And when that bubble pops, the fall is going to be loud. So here's the question. Do you think America can avoid this collapse? Or is it already too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel to get more updates.